Hello everyone and welcome. In today's video I'm going to be showing you how to replace the coolant in your 2007 through present day Toyota Tundra or Toyota Sequoia equipped with either the 4.6 or 5.7 liter V8 engine. Now before we do any work on our vehicle, we want to warm the engine up for about 10 minutes time just to allow the thermostat to open up slightly, and we also want to turn the heater controls to full hot. Firmly apply the parking brake. Now this is what the skid plate looks like once it's been removed from the vehicle. There are actually 5 12mm bolts holding this in. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then on the front, where the bumper is on my truck, there's also 1, 2, 3 sort of coarse threaded screws. And once you unbolt it, that you actually have to shift the skid plate over to one side, right, which then allows you to disconnect these hooks, and then you can detach it from the vehicle. Now the first step in draining the coolant is to locate the radiator drain petcock, and when you're facing the front of the vehicle, it's actually on the driver's side. So I guess I'm facing it, so it's on my right hand side. That when you look up underneath the vehicle after the skid plate's been removed, that you can see the drain petcock right here. And so we're just going to carefully loosen this. And then placing a suitably sized pan that can hold approximately 8 liters of coolant, we're going to open this up. So once the coolant starts draining, we can go ahead and open up the radiator cap on the top to allow air into the system. Now as we are draining the coolant from the radiator, we can go ahead and raise the left side of the vehicle and remove the driver's side wheel so that we can access the driver's side engine block drain valve. Okay guys, so this is what it looks like with the driver's side wheel removed. You can see safety is important. I've got my wheel chocks, parking brake, jack stand, and a really heavy duty jack holding everything up. The engine block drain valve is actually located on the side, and so I'm going to access this by just taking a pry tool here and popping off these little plastic rivets that hold this carpety type material in place. Okay guys, so on the 4.6 liter V8 and similarly on the 5.7 V8, there are block drains on the left and right side of the engine respectively. And so since this is the driver's side and I've removed the wheel and that cover, you can see what that spigot looks like based on where I'm shining my light. If you kind of look up there, you'll see that there's a little 10mm sort of bolt head made out of brass and a nipple. And so we're gonna get a bunch of really long extensions, like 14 inches or longer maybe. And we're gonna put a little socket on there and we're just gonna break that brass valve open. And remember, it's brass, so it's really soft. You can choose to hook up a little hose onto that spigot if you'd like, to make less of a mess, but I'm just going to open it up and let it run into another drain pan. That heat shield just can be, you can kind of push it out of the way. And we're just going to carefully give it a turn. You can see, once I've cracked that open, that coolant's now coming out. Let's open that up. It doesn't have to be open too much, by the way, just because, like, maybe just give it a full turn and you'll see all the coolant start coming out. You can see that. Okay guys, so it's been about 15 minutes or so and now the driver's side drain petcock on the engine block is finally just barely dripping now. So I'll wait a couple more minutes and then we're just going to close that up. Hand tight. Remember, that's a brass valve that can break really easily and you don't want to be trying to replace that valve on the engine block. It's impossible to get to otherwise. But radiator finally stopped dripping with coolant, so it's more or less empty. I'm just gonna quickly pull out my petcock valve just to take a look at the bottom of it to see if it's dirty. As you can see, it's spotless, so I'm good, meaning there's no junk in the radiator. I'm just gonna go ahead now and just tighten that back securely. And just hand tight is good enough. Okay guys, so now that we've drained the radiator as well as the driver's side of the engine block, we can go ahead and reattach the driver's side wheel and then jack the passenger side up and drain that side of the engine block. Okay, so for the passenger side engine drain valve, we have to actually take away this side wheel well cover that's in the wheel well, because unlike the driver's side that was where the valve was more towards the center of the block, this one's more to the front. So I'm just going to take a trim pry tool and get in behind this little pop rivet and just take that out, which will then easily expose where that drain valve is, which is right in front of us. So similar to how we opened up the driver's side one, we're going to use a 10 mil with a whole bunch of extensions and crack that valve open. So just give that about one turn to open it up. And we'll let that drain for about 20 minutes or so. So once the right side valve stops having any coolant come out, we can just go ahead and carefully snug up that drain valve. Again, emphasizing the fact that it is brass and is therefore very delicate. Just hand tight is enough. So once we've closed off the passenger side engine block drain valve, we can now go ahead and reinstall the little rivet for the wheel well cover and then reinstall the wheel and then lower the vehicle. Now to drain the coolant overflow tank, we actually have to use gravity to give us a hand in doing so. Now on the radiator we have our overflow hose that runs to the bottom of this container, but this container here doesn't appear to be removable because there's no bolts holding things in. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to disconnect it from the rad, and then I'm just going to dangle the hose down into a catch pan below, just by unclipping the hose off the reservoir container. Now because the coolant's never been changed on this vehicle, the hoses are probably still very fresh and tight. So I'm going to get a pair of pliers here. I'm just going to twist the hose back and forth to break the seal off the nipple of the radiator. I'm going to pull that back and then carefully detach this hose from the retaining clips on the reservoir container, and then just feed it to the catch basin below. You can see coolant's already coming out. We're just going to drain it that way. It's not the most eloquent way, but it works. Now for those that have really dirty cooling systems or are clean freaks, you can also flush out this container with a bunch of clean distilled water by popping off the top cap and pouring it in and allowing it to drain out the bottom. My coolant overflow reservoir is spotless, it's really clean, so I'm just going to reattach the hose and now refill the system with genuine Toyota coolant. Carefully route your hose back up through the little clips on the overflow tank and then reattach it to your radiator. Add and reinstall the lower skid plate and refill the system with 12 liters of genuine Toyota Super Long Life pink coolant that is 55% ethylene glycol and 45% distilled water. So just go ahead and use an appropriate size funnel and begin filling the system. Okay guys, so I have basically put in 2.5 jugs of coolant. So what am I? That's probably, we'll say 10 liters or so. So now I'm gonna go ahead and start the truck and continue topping off the coolant. Again, make sure your heater controls are on full hot. So just give the upper rad hose a couple of squeezes here. Just to see if that coolant level will go down. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take the remainder of the coolant and I'm going to put that into the overflow tank. And how much I'm going to put in is basically fill it to about 3/4 full. And the reason why I want to put that much in is because there's undoubtedly going to be some air in the system, and as I drive the vehicle, it's going to purge that air through and out onto the overflow tank, and then when the engine cools off, it's going to draw that back into the rad. So I keep adding just a little bit more, giving that upper rad hose a squeeze. Alright, so now that we've completely filled the cooling system, or at least the radiator, to as high as it will go, that I reinstalled the radiator cap and poured whatever remaining coolant I had from my coolant jug into the overflow tank. And so you can see it's about 3/4 full. It took exactly 3 jugs of 3.7 liters each of genuine Toyota coolant. And so the idea here is that there's always going to be a little bit of air left inside the motor, and as you drive and as the motor heats up and cools down, that it's going to purge all that air out of the system via the overflow tube and the overflow tank. Now, I don't know if you guys saw it earlier in the video or not, but as the engine was running, there was some bubbles that were coming up in the overflow tank, which is a sign that as the system pressurizes with the cap installed, that it's going to push out any remaining air that might be trapped in the motor. And when it cools off, it's going to go and draw fresh coolant to top off the motor. I took it for a test drive. I left the heat on full hot, and as I was driving, I also paid close attention to the temperature gauge to make sure that it never went below or never went above the halfway mark. Normal operating temperatures on any car is always slightly below center, and so I've already driven 30 or 40 kilometers. The motor got plenty hot on the highway, as well as some stop and go driving, and it's actually been cooling now for the last hour, and I've actually seen the coolant level in this tank drop slightly, which means it's pulling in coolant. So if you guys like my video, give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching.